Welcome to another episode of Rupert and Pinchy. Hey there, Pinchy.
Hey there, Rupert. How's it going?
Good. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone out there. And we thank you for taking the time to listen to us. We know your time is valuable. And so thank you so much.
Yep.
Um, so this is going to be episode 21. And we're going to, I was thinking, and we've said this so many times over the course of the episodes that we've done, but this is another application of what we've been saying as far as discussing between ourselves is that there's a lot of things going on in the world.
Whoa.
Yeah, but I mean,
Did not
I
expect
mean,
that.
yeah, I mean, real terrible things along with good things, but we're always fighting
So,
the
a bunch of
battles.
things.
Yeah, but we're always battling against. I mean, when you think of Ukraine and you think of abortion, and you think of the upheaval in the schools and all this stuff going on, the fight over climate change, the fight over the food sources, the uh, things that we hear happen in Turkey recently, the earthquake, all these things that are really huge going on in our country and around the world. Uh,
Balloons.
balloons, yeah, balloons flying over. Actually, I checked and I just want you to know, Pinchy, the balloons that were flying over to spy on us are not there anymore. I shot them down with a slingshot. And anyway, so
Okay, David.
okay, so anyway, there's a lot of things going on, and we want to battle against those things, and because it disturbs us, it really makes us sad or sorrowful or angry, and obviously we want to do something about it. Well, today's show is kind of dialing back all those concerns about what we have, and looking at a one simple thing that is a very foundational thing that has the misunderstanding of it has caused a lot of the problems we see all around us. And so rather than just always putting out the fire, why not eliminate the spark?
Mm-hmm.
You know, first. I mean,
Right.
it's great to put out fires, but why don't we? And so today, the subject that we're going to talk about is one which I haven't announced yet. Anyway,
I
it's
could
which
not
is
tell that you didn't announce it yet.
well, I know you're just like, why doesn't he say it? But anyway, because I'm purposely just leading on and on. It's something
I
that
could tell.
Pinchy and I have been debating and discussing and learning about from our debate and from our discussion. Even though we kind of had a core understanding of it,
Mm-hmm.
by the fact that we discussed it and debated it, it brought it out into more and more light. And I mean, and we and at times, I as far as in debate, I guess uh, maybe it's just because of my age. Sometimes I have a,
I
I
think it's
mean,
probably because of your age.
Pinchy has a lot of duration. Uh, but sometimes he's like, I just don't want to talk about this anymore. but 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 there's more to talk about it because and then we sleep on it and we go back to talking about it again and we think, oh my goodness, are we ever going to come? And what
It had to
one of
have
the
been
things?
6 hours just in total.
Oh, I think it was
9?
more.
Yeah,
Yeah,
probably.
and intense discussion, and so and some of it was that we were battling to come to a consensus of our understanding, an
Right.
agreement that we could understand between one another. And sometimes, and you have to learn how to. We have to learn how to operate when we don't feel that we have that consensus. And so sometimes you don't feel you have consensus when you really do, but you're not recognizing it. Other times you don't have that uh, not that we can agree, absolutely agree on everything, but there's certain principles that we have to come to some agreement on that in order to move forward
Right.
together. And so sometimes we don't recognize that that agreement's there because of one of two possibilities. It is there or it isn't there. We don't, those are the two possibilities.
Well,
And
really?
so, yeah. And so for us or for any individual, and we're just talking two individuals
Right.
here. So one of us might feel that we have an agreement, and the other might feel like I'm not sensing that agreement. So that's why it pushes on. Or so anyway, so Pinchy and I, just out of the blue, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I brought up the fact of the idea of freedom, and then we discussed that and, and discussed it and discussed it, and we were disgusted by our discussing. No, we weren't
No,
disgusted,
not
but
really.
we discussed it right until the point that it was like midnight or 12:30, and we didn't have any more energy to really discuss it. And on top of that, it was that very precious time to have a cigar for me.
And then wasn't
So
there another time that you came over and we talked about it again?
yeah,
Yeah.
that was yeah. I think we talked about uh,
It's been
your
three
mom
times
and
now.
yeah, your mom and your grandma Susan went on a trip, and I think that was the second time. I think there was one time before that
Yeah, I
that
might
we
be not remembering correctly, but it felt like it's been three times of
but
us discussing it.
yeah, but bottom line, we were talking about freedom, and 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 we started where we should start is, well, how do you define freedom? And so it was a very lengthy and it has been a very lengthy discussion. And in fact, we had a marathon yesterday talking about this. Very good marathon, and it's all been good, but it hasn't been easy, has it?
No. Nope.
No, it requires when any time we're going to walk in unity, and not just a fake unity, but a unity that we're unified in love, but we're also unified in understanding.
Right.
Now, sometimes, or it would be nice if we started out with unity of understanding, and then we go like, oh wow, unity of love is pretty easy. But that's not usually how it starts out. Usually, the understanding is secondary, and so we have to. So humility and love set up the groundwork for we can be unified in love,
Right.
and then let's work on our understanding, and let's not have investments in the game other than investments in the truth. If we
Right.
both invest in the truth, then by God's grace we can come to some unity of understanding. And so when we when we when we look at our world, but let's specifically just think about our country, we are in a crisis of freedom. And someone will say, that seems weird. Well, what I mean by we're in a crisis of freedom, whether or not someone feels like we have uh, too much freedom or not enough freedom, we are in a crisis of freedom because, unfortunately, as time has gone on in the time that we've been a country, we've become less and less clear on what freedom is. And so now this we're going to be discussing mostly on basically the civic level as far as in our country and in our
Right.
communities, but this also applies in our faith walk. Having the right understanding of freedom in our faith walk is very just as crucial as it is um, in our walk in as a country or as a people or as a society. So so with that being said, the reason we have, I believe the reason, and we both believe some of the reason we have a crisis in freedom is because we don't have the right understanding of what it is.
Right.
And if you have a misunderstanding of what something is, we don't really need to give examples for what that means. Oh, I'm brushing my teeth. Well, that's a knife. It's a bad idea. It's not going to go well. Yeah, you're going to be, so I mean, if you misapply or misuse a foundational, fundamental thing, it's going to cause issues from then on. And so our battle was for us to try to come to an understanding of definitions.
Right.
And and paradoxically, we were coming from different points, but the same point at the same time in a way. So do you want to give some thoughts on those definitions, or give those definitions,
Right.
or would you like me to? It's up
Well,
to you.
we'll start with the world's understanding, I think.
Okay.
So, it typically seems like what people consider freedom, they consider, I mean, one, they consider America as like founded on freedom. And so that's really important. If America's founded on freedom, if we have the wrong idea of freedom, that's a bad
It'll
idea.
be an issue. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be an absolute issue. And so I think it typically seems like people consider freedom is I can do whatever I want unless I harm someone. That's the more Republican, conservative, like, leave me alone libertarian view, right? Would be you can do whatever you want, just don't bother me. It's the idea.
Would you say I would include Democrats on that.
Yes,
In
but
general, yeah.
well, some
Go ahead. Go
okay.
ahead.
I think that I would agree that both of them do that, but I'm saying like the typical idea for the conservative is just leave me alone. I can do what um as long as the laws don't harm me. And so the reason why I start there is because it makes them give up on their principles of
Hmm.
abortion and transgenderism. It's just they kind of give up on those issues, and so I would put the Democrats in that bubble as well. Um, but the
Yeah.
problem is so much of their legislation and ideas are about controlling other people. So I have
Right.
so I
Well,
have
okay. So
trouble with that.
I see where you're going on that.
So I
Yeah, I
kind of
see.
had trouble saying that they believe
Right.
the exact same thing in that
Right.
regard.
I understand that. Okay.
So the idea is you can do what you want, just don't bother me. And so I have the question: why shouldn't you bother someone else? I mean,
Hmm.
why do you have freedom and everything else except for somebody else?
Hmm.
And this goes back to just individualism and the idea that I am the sole arbiter of my destiny and truth,
Hmm.
right? And so the idea
Hmm.
is their idea of freedom is um, leave me alone. I can do whatever I want, but I won't harm someone else. That's the idea. And so, what does that lead to?
So
Do you consider?
yeah. So before we get to what it leads to, let me reframe it as the definition. You kind of described it. Let's define it. So what you're talking about is people that, and the two working definitions that we're basically going to be discussing are true. One is more true than the other, but they're both true and important. But the definition you're describing is that you would define freedom as the freedom to choose to take an action, whether good or bad. You're free to
Right,
choose. You okay? And so that definition is accurate, but like everything, it has prerequisites. It has disclaimers and clarifiers. So tell me if I'm wrong, but you're defining that the people that you're stating are saying that I have the freedom to do whatever I want, right or wrong, and then you added as long as it doesn't hurt somebody, and uh, that would probably I think that's accurate. Um, Although there's those few that don't care if it hurts somebody or not.
right,
But
right.
anyway,
I think that's few
so
though. Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, so would you say that that's the definition that we are hearing when we say that if we were to poll, we are presuming, but we're not only presuming without facts. We feel that if we went out and polled friends, family, although our friends and family may have a better understanding of freedom, but in general, we go out and poll the public. This is the definition we think they're going to give us, that I
Right.
have freedom is the right to choose to do whatever you want. And without clarification, that could be a very dangerous thing. So,
Oh,
anyways,
yeah,
go ahead.
absolutely. That would be dangerous, and the reason why is because it makes it seem like every action is a good one. What I mean by that
Right.
is, if you make an action, it's what's good for you because you feel like it is, right? It's what
Yeah.
you perceive as good, so it must be good to you, right? And
Hmm.
so I think that this rationale has been used many times just to justify transgenderism and stuff like that. Is this is what I feel like is best for me. Don't interfere. And so the idea that I see is they always seem to think that the problem is when there are the problem is outside influence that does not allow them to make their decision without any coercion. And they consider coercion as information. You can't be influenced by people that disagree with you. And so the idea is no interference by anything. You can make your
Hmm.
own decisions. And I think that that's really dangerous.
So basically, what you're saying then is another way to say that I can take an act. Every action is permissible. Is basically what you're saying.
Yes.
You have permission to do any action because that's what freedom tells us.
Right. That's the idea.
That okay, and so and and of course we're not there yet. But then certain every action has a consequence.
Right.
You know, every cause will have you know every force will have an equal and opposite
Right.
reaction, and so there's going to be results from whatever decisions we make. So
Right.
anyway, so okay, so you're saying that okay that they feel they can do whatever they want.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then that they should not be punished for doing it or restricted from doing it in any way, which includes information and words. I mean, just words.
Hmm.
And so I think that the reason why I'm going more in depth of why they of what the general consensus of what freedom is because there are so many problems with it. It makes everything seem like everything's okay. And in my mind, it's like, well, there's an objective reality, and they're just ignoring it and just trying to act like it doesn't exist. And so it's not just a. I think it not only harms me when everyone assumes that I have want to restrict people's freedoms, and that they hate people hate those that would tell anyone what they think,
Hmm.
and so and it harms the rest of society because everyone ends up thinking good is evil and evil is good, or good is good and evil is evil. You know.
Hmm. Well, and so then you think, okay, so if we are going to poll the public and they're going to say that, okay, they define freedom as the right to do whatever one chooses.
Right.
And then we think of people coming, wanting to come to, for example, our country, let's say, and I'm certainly there's a lot of good people wanting to do it for the right reasons. But let's just say somebody's coming over here because they've heard through the grapevine that in America you can do whatever you want. Everything's legal. There's freedom there. That's the misunderstanding of freedom. And uh, so you step back and you go like, okay, if we analyze it even from the beginning and even now, even our opponents or our fellow travelers, rather than put them in antagonistic position, our fellow travelers uh, will agree that there has to be some certain limits
Right.
on freedom in order for societies to thrive. We all have so there has to be those limits or laws that designate, or the laws are basically showing what is acceptable,
Right.
and not only acceptable, but it is beneficial. So as simple as saying the speed limit in a school zone is 25 miles an hour. So if we take uh, that person that defines freedom as the ability to do whatever you want, then that person might be offended that, wait a minute, I want to go 100, you know, in
Right.
the school zone. And so those restrictions, everyone kind of recognizes that, there needs to be some guidelines, there
Right.
needs to be some fences. And some of them are very, very crucial, right? I
Right.
mean, you know, uh, murder's illegal, right?
Yep.
For a good reason. And so the person that comes over and says, "Well, I like to kill people." Well, okay, but we have laws here that, well, then I'm not free. So you see what I'm saying? There's certain
Right.
laws that are guidelines or guideposts that direct society, or are intended to direct society to thriving,
Yeah,
to
and
health.
would anybody say that in a society where murder is legal that they're living in freedom when they murder people?
Right,
Who would
right,
ever say that? Unless
right.
they
A
really have
psychopath. A psychopath.
right, unless they really have some problem with the idea that some actions are right and some actions are wrong. It's like clearly there's something wrong with killing someone, and I don't think anybody would could call that freedom. Really. I mean, it's like
Hmm.
unless we consider freedom not being restrained by anything, which is
Right.
kind of what the idea is, but
Yeah, the misunderstanding, the that's the misunderstanding of what's causing the havoc. Now somebody can say, "Well, I thought you just said that we all agree that there's certain laws." Well, now we have to, again, we're dialing in closer.
that's the logical
Now,
conclusion,
of what? Go
honestly.
ahead.
No,
Of
of
what?
their understanding of freedom.
Anarchy.
Right.
Yeah. The last person will be the person standing with the gun saying, "Well, everyone else is dead." I mean, that's anarchy. So, and that's where we're headed.
Right.
And that's where kind of we are as a country. Whether or not there's some semblances of order, but we won't get to
Right.
that
So
yet.
what are we
So
missing? That's a real question.
so so we get to the point that, okay, we need guidelines now. So then, what is required to find out? Well, what is a just law? What is truth?
Right.
What is good? What gives cause of thriving? Why do we say that we need to outlaw murder? Well, or to outlaw stealing. Now, so you can pass a law, and we have laws against a bunch of things. And let's just say, as far as the just laws, the laws that are good, simply because there's a law there doesn't mean we all obey it,
Right.
right?
Right.
So in the definition of freedom, this first definition, which we say is a real definition, it's a working definition, that freedom can be defined as the right to make a free choice,
Right.
and that choice might be wrong or right.
Right.
Okay, so and obviously the law tries to identify what the right choice is and prohibit the wrong choice, but still people still will make the wrong choice. So then someone will say, uh, then why the havoc? Well, because what is right is in confusion, and the obeying of the law is in confusion. We're in a time of lawlessness, And so, uh, but if we're trying to have a good society, if our country and our fellow citizens want to have a good society and they want to have the society, one of the pillars is built on freedom,
Hmm.
we have to agree that freedom is defined as being able to make a free choice. Okay? But we have to recognize some choices are bad and some are good.
Right.
And once we come to that, then you get into the argument about, well, what is good, right?
Right. Well, yeah, it absolutely comes
So,
back to that. I mean, I
hmm
think that this some of these problems that we run into is just people don't s- recognize good or evil, and think that um, those things are based on subjecti- subjectivity, and
hmm
that I think this a lot of this is about godlessness and
hmm
not recognizing God, and
Oh, absolutely,
yeah,
sure.
because all goodness and all understanding of goodness comes from God.
hmm Right. This is okay. So if we're saying that the crisis in freedom that we have is because we misunderstand freedom as a country as a whole, and we're not even talking about the players involved in that maybe knowingly are misusing that for any some kind of gain of power
Right,
or
right,
money. We're just saying that if as a citizen, as a society of citizens, if we really want to have freedom, then we first need to understand a working definition of freedom and how we work toward that. So, and what you were mentioning is you said that if a society uh, rejects God, and not everyone in our society has rejected God, but there has been a lot of
yeah,
rejection of God within our society. And if we believe in something called the natural law, and we'll talk about that briefly, I'll mention that briefly in a minute. Uh, Natural law is built upon or or predicated by a supernatural law.
right,
And so if we as a people reject the supernatural, the divine law of God, then inevitably our understanding or application or our willingness to comply to any kind of natural law will break down and break down fairly quickly.
mm-hmm,
So, what do we mean by natural law? And I just want to tie it back to our discussion with the country and the laws and the idea of freedom. If you think of a parent, mother and father raising a son or daughter, and right from the time that they're born, as you're raising that son or daughter, to say that you're raising in freedom, you hope so. Yeah, I'm going to raise my child in an atmosphere of freedom. Okay, does that mean he can play in the oven?
no,
Right?
no,
Does that mean he can play with knives with his friends that are like 2 years old? No. Does it mean that she can take her friends to the drive-in theater when she's 10? No. So obviously we see, but as we train them in what is seemingly naturally common sense of mode of action, yeah, you don't put your hands on the burner, okay? You don't put your head in the oven, um, and you don't know you can't take the car out. You're only 10. You don't have a license, but you're working toward that.
right,
You're learning the basis for a proper function as an adult somewhere along the line. And as you grow, more and more responsibility or freedom in the sense that you're going to make your own
right,
decisions, is given you because there's an indication from your parents that you've learned You now can walk in the kitchen.
Hmm.
Why? Because you know not to put your hand on the stove,
Right. Yeah. Yep.
right? So, so we see, and even if someone wants to reject, let's say they want to reject, they're not particularly uh, godly or interested in following God. Okay, they still can have an understanding, a basic understanding of natural law, and so, or the idea that freedom is not just in this world. Freedom is not just simply unbridled. You can do whatever you want,
Right.
right?
Right. Well,
Uh,
I think what you're getting at is we are raised or should be raised to recognize reality. That
sure.
this hurts you if you put your head in the oven, and it to play with knives is dangerous and you can hurt yourself. It's trying to get us to recognize reality, and I think when we recognize reality, we're like, reality is the most obvious form of truth to see. I mean, the world that we live in,
Hmm.
the what we see and what we touch and feel is the most
Hmm.
real when it comes to us physically. So
Hmm.
I think what that makes us realize is that if there's physical realities that govern the world, is there not a higher form
Hmm.
of reality that dictates our natural reality, our natural laws, right?
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
think it's kind of like a there's like a dual um, relationship between natural law and um, eternal law,
Supernatural law.
or
Yeah.
what
Supernatural law.
supernatural law. And I think that
Eternal law would be fine to say, or
right.
divine law to say, but because we use it natural law, it's just nice to say, okay,
Mm-hmm.
supernatural law. Okay,
But
go
I
ahead.
mean, you were talking about just how people have forgotten the supernatural law, and I think the natural law points to the supernatural law, and then supernatural law points to the natural law. I think they
Hmm.
both work together. So, we're parents are supposed to teach their kids both, but I mean, natural law is the easiest to teach children, I think.
Well, you're right in the fact that um, it's the first thing necessary. The scripture even says that the physical man comes first and the spirit comes second. We would always think that that's opposite,
Right.
or but really as we look at it, it's like, okay, so when we think of the natural law or what you're talking about, it's easier to teach children that. It's because it's because when you have that round circle with the different shapes in it, their eyes and their hands and their minds are working, and they're taking the round circle and putting it in the round circle. They're seeing the effects of applying reality.
Right.
Okay, the four-sided square only can go in this. Oh, so they're starting to recognize a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you say that the natural law, for example, and this is not the show on natural law, we're going to come back to freedom. We're still
Right.
talking about freedom, but you're saying that that's easier to teach. It's more accessible, and then that is one of those things. That's one of those aces that God puts in our hands when we're playing to stack the deck in our favor. It's
Absolutely.
one of those things that help us once we start to see the natural law play out in reality. We then realize, or can realize, that there must be something that we can't see that organizes this whole
Right.
cosmos. And then we start to see, um, without even scripture or even anyone teaching us at this point per se, that there's probably some correlation between how I observe things in that natural with things that might be God. We're not even at that point of.
Right.
We just know that our parents didn't come from nothing. We know that the stove did not come from nothing that I can't put my hand on. We know that that bedroom that my parents trained me to clean in a certain way doesn't clean itself from by itself. I have to do it, and I didn't come from nothing. Something caused me. So then all of a sudden, it points back to it gives us the question, what, and then of course God doesn't leave us there. He
Right.
gives us not only that natural revelation, but he gives us supernatural revelation. And again, so then we go like, okay, so then if we realize that freedom, yes, a working definition and an accurate definition of freedom is the freedom to make a choice or take an
Freedom.
action, or the freedom.
Yeah.
Freedom is the ability to choose a certain action or movement without any, you're free to make that choice.
Right.
That's freedom. Freedom to choose. And it may be good, may be bad. We know that is a true definition.
Right.
But for that to work, we have to correctly, like you said, identify reality.
Right.
And
Put it in the bounds of reality.
right. And that those bounds are accessible to all of us.
Right.
Okay? So, but because of sin and because of human weakness, we sometimes, yeah, I know I shouldn't kill my neighbor, but he has a really nice car. Right?
Right.
And I really like his car. And
Why don't you
his
just steal the car instead?
Well, I'm not a really bright criminal,
I
apparently.
don't think so.
But, well, the reason, well, maybe I am a bright one because if I can do both. If I don't put him
All right.
away, he's going to let people know that I took his car, right? So, anyway, so then you realize, okay, so there are things that reasonably should guide us. And so, do you have a place to go from there?
Well, yeah.
Do
I
you have
mean,
something to come?
I think that. So the real question is, what is freedom? Right. I mean, we talked about
Mm-hmm.
it being put in the bounds of reality, but what does that mean? What does that change freedom to, in your mind?
What do you mean? Where are you
Well,
going?
what is your idea of what freedom is?
Well, okay, so I think like you and I have talked about the two types of freedom, or not types, two definitions.
Right.
Working definitions are accurate, um, and they're both real. Okay, but sometimes it's a matter of placing oneself or wanting to place oneself in the higher one.
Right.
Well, you know, and so another working definition, and maybe this is where you're going, a working definition of freedom that I like, and that Isaiah likes as well, Pinchy likes as well, but and we feel it's a working definition, is freedom is an attribute of the will by which it is able to choose between various goods. And what you'll notice between those two definitions, the first one that we gave, which we say is a correct and right working definition of freedom, and this one says that freedom is the ability of the will to choose between goods,
Right.
only good.
Hmm.
And so, what we are saying is that for to have what we've talked about, we've called it true freedom, higher freedom, uh, is to choose only good. So, if ice cream is good, let's say, then I can have vanilla or chocolate.
Right.
Or you can be that really strange person that has strawberry. I'm sorry. Strawberry, no, I love strawberry too. But uh so so is that where you were
Yeah,
heading
and,
toward?
and I wanted to want to point something out about that. Is I think
Mhm.
really the two definitions are about the ability to choose between certain goods, and then the other one would be perceived goods,
Mhm.
and is the ability to choose between perceived goods, because the fact is, since the garden, our view and our ability to think is what would it be? It's we always consider what we want to do as um, trying to aim for a perceived good. And so we believe, so people have wrong impressions of what that is. And I think that the fact is, the reason why your definition right now makes sense is because we are designed in a specific way, and that's only to choose good,
Right.
right? So
Which,
so
yeah.
that's like the only option
So
in
then we
heaven.
go. So let me ask you a question. Uh, we humans run the earth. Okay. Did we come up with the idea of freedom?
No,
No, we perceived it. So and so what we're perceiving something outside of our world, a rule, a moral guideline, or a condition, because freedom in essence is a condition. What does that definition say? It's an attribute of the will. It's a condition of the will. It's not a flavor. It's a condition. Like if I'm, your Uncle Chuck or Uncle Scott, my condition is tall. You know, it's not. I'm tall. Um, yeah, your Uncle Gary's tall too, but not as tall as Uncle Chuck or Uncle Scott. So, so it's a condition. So, but we as people recognize there's some freedom, and so logic can get us to the point as being a social animal that there needs to be certain laws that govern our behavior. Okay.
right,
Well, freedom didn't come from us. So it can't. So God has a sense, or He established freedom. Not so much like He decided one day, okay, let's have freedom. No, He is freedom. Just like we talk about truth, He is truth. We talk about being alive, He is life. He is the very thing. So God in Himself operates in freedom. Pure, pure, absolute, instantaneous freedom. Instantaneously, infinitely, and eternally, always choosing good. Even before we were around. In the Trinity of the Godhead of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Always eternally, absolutely, immediately choosing good. Operating pure freedom. And so we as creatures are aiming for that, right?
right.
We want to only choose good. That's why this definition is a true and workable definition. Someone may say, well, that doesn't really work out in real life. And we both will agree that, yeah, that is the case. Bad decisions are made. Mistakes are made. We know that. So you were coming to the fact that we were created for freedom and freedom only. God didn't say that, okay, I'm going to create a free creature. In order for that creature to be free, I need them to have the ability to kill themselves or stay alive. But then there's that mystery in the garden, right? Of how he comes and he creates the garden. He puts Adam and Eve in there. He puts, let's say, 100 fruit trees in there. And let's say why we have to, one of the mysteries is, why didn't he just say all the fruit trees are good for food? Why didn't he make all the fruit trees good for food? And then all their choices would have been good choices,
Mm-hmm.
right? But in a mystery, go ahead.
Well, the mystery that you're getting at is about the fruit, of the knowledge of good and evil, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that the answer to me is God wants us to choose Him,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why He gave us the ability to um, obey Him.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really the answer to the mystery. Is that
Mm-hmm.
God wants us to choose Him, and so it wasn't necessarily about which fruit to choose. It was about which God to choose.
Mm-hmm.
Man, oneself, or God.
Well, yeah, he wanted. Okay, so you're absolutely right. I want to drill deeper a little bit and then come back to what you're saying. And some people will agree and some people won't. But regardless, whatever is true is going to be true. We hope that we're right in what we believe and think. So he could have made 100 trees, and all of our choices would have been good. And but strangely, he made one tree, or one tree in the garden was not good for man. It would have been a bad choice.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is the tree was not bad in itself.
Right.
Because the scripture says all the trees, everything he made was good, right?
Right.
But then he said, "But you can have eat of all the trees, but of this tree you shall not eat of, because in the day that you eat you shall die." He didn't call that tree evil. He just said that it's not good for you, At least now, maybe someday had we had our parents obeyed, maybe there would have been, if they would have focused on and ate the tree of life first, maybe God would have said, "Well, okay, now eat this tree and now you're mature enough to understand what that tree represents or what that condition might bring." But that's a different podcast. But he said that you shall not eat of that tree. Very important to recognize that tree he's not calling evil.
Right.
It was our action that became evil, or the action of Adam and Eve. So, okay, so it seems like if we define God's understanding of freedom and how He operates, and that's what we're to aim for. Why did He give that option? And then you said the mystery is solved by obedience, right?
Right.
And so all the trees are good, but he just said you can eat these 99, not this one. And the Lord was wanting us to obey and to trust. He was trying to draw us into a deeper relationship than just simply being a computer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so what you're saying then is, in a paradoxical way, is that there's something in man. We know that man is created, right? Or we profess and believe that man is created. So therefore, nothing that I do is truly, I can't say that I brought myself into being. And so any action or non-action or whatever can be ultimately placed at my feet, obviously. It's at the Creator's feet. But God wants to make us, He made us in His image, but He wants us to be in His likeness. And so God chooses continually, eternally, forever, instantaneously, always for the good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what He wants for us. He's not being eternally good because we want Him to be, or anything else is forcing Him to be. He's freely choosing that.
Right.
And if He wants us to be like Him, He has to put us in a position to freely choose the good.
Right, and I think that's what it means to be made in God's image and likeness.
Well,
God
that's why. Go ahead.
Is God wants us to be good, and to choose good, to always choose to be good, and to follow in His goodness, because He's good in Himself. I mean, that's a little bit different, but God can make His own decisions, and He always makes the right one, and He wants us to be the same way. He wants us to make decisions and make the right ones. And I think that's the thing, is it's hard for people to fathom that God knew that evil would come to exist, right? So
Mhm.
clearly, there's something that he thought was so important that he knew that wickedness, even if wickedness would come from it, it was worth it in some way. He does not like wickedness. That's not what I'm saying. You know what I'm
Right. He
saying. I'm
doesn't
saying,
condone it. He doesn't promote it. Exactly.
right, what I'm saying though is he thought something was really important to give us the opportunity to be able to fail.
Hmm. Well, so when you say, we are all made in God's image. Every man, woman, and child is made in God's image. And sometimes we can split it up to get a better understanding. We can say we're all made in God's image, but He also wants us to be in His likeness.
Right.
What I mean is by that is if I'm Michelangelo or some famous sculptor and I'm sculpting the image of a man, and I sculpt the image of a man, it could be said that that image is in my, or that statue is in my image. Wow, that looks just like you, Michelangelo. But it's not like you because
Right.
it's made of stone, right? So God is making us not in we're already in his image, but he's also bringing us into his likeness,
Right, which is perfection.
which is perfection and freedom, always choosing the good. And so what that means is that something of man, we know that grace moves man, and God elevates man and gives him abilities to choose the good. But there's something in man that, in our love of God, it is our love.
Mm-hmm.
A part of it is us loving or obeying. Just like if we choose to not love or disobey, that's why punishment or correction is totally just. Why? Because it's our sin. Now we couldn't, or it's our rebellion. Now we could not, from our own natural efforts, reach heaven
Right.
because we gave that away in the garden. That did require Christ because he became the door, right? He's the door, he's
Mm-hmm.
the light, he's the shepherd, he's the sheep, he's the
He's a
shepherd's
sheep.
staff.
Oh yeah, he
Yeah,
is
he
a
says,
sheep. Yeah.
yeah,
Lamb.
wow, that's surprising. He's the shepherd's staff, which is kind of the law. He's the truth, he's the life. He's all those things that we need to enter in order to go into him. And without him, we could not get there. But he gets us ready. He feeds us grass, we get fat, we grow wool, hopefully, and we listen to his voice. Anyway, so then coming back to our crisis of freedom. We regardless of being Christian or non-Christian, we all can understand that laws and rules are necessary, that freedom needs to be governed by just laws and not just mayhem. And someone can say, well, everyone believes that yeah, we have laws, but they don't live as if there's laws,
Right.
right? Our leaders are not leading as if there's laws. They're leading as if there's laws that apply to you and I, but not to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're actually doing what we believe. So uh, if someone says, "Oh yeah, I believe there's certain laws and guidelines," well, you're living as if there's no laws and guidelines. And so when we get to the point, and this is the thing that well, there's a lot of problems going on in the world, and we're trying to focus on what can we do. Well, individually, we can start operating in 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 freedom in the true sense that it's to choose the good.
Mm-hmm.
And then those around us, we can say that freedom is such that yeah, the good and bad choices can be made, but we need to make good choices, and we need to start identifying and arguing about what is good, you know, and agreeing on that as a society. Is it good to eliminate the unborn? No, those are our future. Those are children. Those are
Right.
made in the image and likeness of God. And so where do you want to go from there?
Well, I don't know if you want to close out soon, but I have something that I do maybe want to end with when we get there.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, okay, I'll just finish up my last couple comments. And we could go into so much on this.
And we
We
already
just want
did,
to,
but yes, we can go even further.
but I mean, well, because we've had, but we didn't even get into a lot of some notes that we had here listed to discuss. But the main thing we just wanted to bring out is just to have a discussion, try to bring the discussion that uh, Pinchy and I have had between ourselves before you all, so that you could have that discussion, and so I hope just discussing and bringing up the question, even if the only thing that our podcast was to convey, today's podcast would be, what do you define as freedom?
Right.
If we said that and said, okay, thanks for joining us, yeah, granted, you wouldn't have had to listen to us for an hour or so, but you would have missed out. You know that it would have been a bad deal. You would rather listen to us. But if anyone listening just goes like, "Huh, I wonder what freedom is," that's our goal. You start thinking about that,
Mm-hmm.
and if you are of goodwill and you want to learn the truth and you want to live the truth, um, then that idea or that thought or that question that we present to you is one of many solutions for what's going in our country,
Right.
okay, or what's going on in our individual lives, or what's going in our lives in relationship to his church, or what's going on in our lives with a relationship to the Lord. uh, Freedom is one of those things that are necessary to thrive in those things. And so if the civilization were to crumble, which it seems like it's surely headed that way, we want to understand freedom so that if it's not the time of the end and that a rebuild needs to be done, that people are around that understand what freedom is and rebuild it again.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, and I
uh,
think some things that we highlighted made me think of um, the Declaration of Independence.
mhm.
And I think it lays out pretty well what we are missing today. So let me read just this part.
Okay.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. And I'm just going to stop for a second. People don't appreciate truth, and they do not believe in self-evidence. That all men are created. That's another thing that people don't believe anymore, and that we're missing. Created equal. That they are endowed by their creator. They don't believe in a creator. With certain unalienable rights. That among these are life. We don't appreciate life anymore. Liberty, which is similar to freedom in a way. And the pursuit of happiness. These are all things that I believe that we do not appreciate anymore. And then this other part. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So, that's another thing that we forget. What is government instituted for? And so, even the where we get the idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, people don't even read all of this. They don't even consider all this. If we ignore this, then everything just falls apart. And I think I wanted to just highlight that because many of the things that we were talking about, and it goes back to our Creator. It goes back that we are created, that God has given us certain rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that all of these things are neglected.
And like you said in the very beginning, it says these things are self-evident. It can be, and so what it's saying there, it's recognizing that in nature we can see that this idea is self-evident. And what
Right.
is our first our the first life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or property as it is might be said. Um, those they listed those, I think, in a certain order for a reason.
Yeah.
In order to have anything, what is the most important?
Life.
Life, right? And then that life needs liberty in order to operate freely. And it needs to operate freely in order to pursue property, in order to build and thrive. And that property should be protected against others that might live. So if we go back to that life, uh, uh, you said that, or I should say, the Constitution said that we are created.
Well, the Declaration of Independence, yeah.
Yeah, the Declaration of Independence. We're created, and so if I have if I have land and I create, I'm not really creating, but let's say I make a house. Does does my neighbor have a right to come onto my property and tear it down? No.
No.
So if all men are created, it says all men are created equal. If all men are created, that would be man and woman, then you and I and our children and our unborn children are not ours. We don't have a right to destroy that house. And so, anyway,
Right.
so
Thank you guys for watching.
mhm,
Please subscribe if you want.
Godspeed.
Have a good week.